of Latin America and the Caribbean 2026 and how to position the region in the global scenario, an event organized by CAF, BID, and with the support of the Government of Panama. We have some English-speaking speakers, and we will have simultaneous interpretation if it's necessary. Please let me remind you all to take the headsets at the entrance. Let me remind you all that our event is broadcasted in 3 languages and we have simultaneous interpretation. You can download the app and grab one of those headsets that you can find at the front door. Please share your experiences with the Foro Económico CAF hashtag and in our social media as in X, Facebook as well. And we appreciate and we thank our media partners. Please as CNN, El País, La Prensa, La Estrella de Panamá, Mercado, El Tiempo, El Universo, El Mercurio, El Comercio, ABC, Radio Panamá, The Guardian, La Nación, Listing Diario, RCN, El Deven, Eco, Diario El Salvador o Globo y TVM. We start our second day with this session, Economic Perspectives of Latin America 2025, Boosting and Financing Reproductive Transformation. This is why I would like to invite Veronica Crisancho, Manager of Knowledge in CAF, Felix Fernandez Shaw, Director for Latin America and the Caribbean and the relationships with all the countries and territories, and the Association of International Associations of the European Commission, Arnadotin, Director of the Center of Development of the OCDE, and Jose Manuel Salazar, Sirinax, Executive Secretary of the CEPAL. Please, a round of applause for them. We start with the first panel. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very glad to welcome you all as hosts in this great economic forum. As you can see from last year, it's grown up a lot, and I would like to welcome you all to this session where we'll talk about the economic perspectives of Latin America. And this year, it is focused on a very crucial topic for the region, which is to drive and finance the productive transformation, which is a key element for growth and production that's delayed in the region. In this session, we will see the results of the LEO report, which is a collaboration between CAF, the OECD, CEPAL, and the European Commission. I think this is totally relevant to highlight the report in a collaborative way, as we've been doing it for many years, where we feel very proud as CAF to give this input from and for the region, contributing with our partners who might have these more global perspective of our topics. In this moment, we are in a crossroad. We've heard in different panels and the plenary as well during this session. We need to grow, and we need to grow in a sustainable fashion. And this report highlights the incredible potential of the region, which is a topic that we've been listening for during the different sessions. And the idea is to focus on how we can take advantage of the natural potential of the region, and we walk through some economies that should be more diversified with the added value that are also inclusive and sustainable economies. A fundamental foundation for this is the design of policies of productive development, both for horizontal instruments that give foundations for the different productive areas in the region, but also with a systemic coordination with a more vertical scope on sectors that are strategic and have huge potential for wealth generation in the region. A second pillar of this report will be focused on the financing of this public policies of development, as it is not possible to have a real productive transformation without an efficient mobilization of financial resources. This involves CAF and other actors, such as, well, financing actors that finance development. But it also implies moving internal capital markets and finding ways to find innovative ways for financing. A third pillar of the book leads us to redirect international cooperation. We're in a scenario, as we heard in the previous sessions, multilateralism might be coming to a transformation phase, and in that context, it is fundamental to have these type of productive development discussions regarding direct foreign investment and the way we coordinate these efforts between the actors. And this LEO of 2025, what it does is to design a clear roadmap. We have some key recommendations to try to be as concrete as possible as for institutions, financing, and policies that are necessary to generate the capabilities that we need in the region and to achieve this sustainable growth. I share my gratitude to all the partners. Now I'll give the floor so you can help me out with the opening words and highlight once again how valuable this alliance is. We really appreciate it, and we think it is fundamental to have this type of collaborations in the projects that we have. Thank you very much, and I'll leave the floor to Felix. Thank you, Veronica. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to CAF for organizing this monumental Leo that is so interesting and so relevant. And thanks to Raga, the OCDE, and Jose Manuel of CEPAL for being here, but also for working with the Leo that we've been working on it for a few years. And as Veronica mentioned, if you take a close look at what we're doing here, I'm not so sure that multilateralism is not trendy, but what we are sure of is that the OCDE, the European Union, the CEPAL, and CAF, we have a common vision of what we can offer to the world. Yesterday and today we have some very high level discussions, and this Leo with this topic, I think it indicates, and therefore it wants to offer to Latin America and the Caribbean an analysis of what could be the materialization of the presentations we heard yesterday that talk about how bad everything is. So when we talk about the complex geopolitical situation, what it's saying, how bad is everything? And what it also says is what is the challenge for Latin America and the Caribbean, and the challenge that Latin America and the Caribbean have, as is stated in the report, is the productive transformation that is inclusive and sustainable. These are words that everyone commonly uses and don't really know what it means. What the report says is that what did the other heads of state do 3 years ago in Brussels, and they repeated it in Santa Marta? We need to make progress in the value chain. We need to incorporate technology. We need to improve the human capital. We need Latin America to stop being just a supplier of raw material, and it should become it should start to transform. It would require commercial investment and productive investment, the one that bets for human capital, the one that transfer technology, the one that creates local added value. And this is what the region lets to participate in the world market with a role that's not just the initial of the value chain. And in this regard, I'm talking on behalf of a region or an integration project that is normally at the end of the value chain. And what we need to figure out between Europe and Latin America and the Caribbean is that someone has stood in the middle in the middle. And what we need to think of in our continental task, you and us, and jointly through the Mercosur agreement, or the agreements we have with Chile, or the market agreements that we have, how can we move from trade to added value? And this is what it is really stated at the LEO, alignment between private and public sector and international cooperation. If we can all join these ideas, I think Latin America, the Caribbean, and Europe have huge potential, not only in terms for deciding, but also for having influence in the world that we have today. If we don't play this game, or if we don't want to play this game, we will not be designing the world we will desire. And for this purpose, and with this I wrap up, the European Union has put on the table its strategy Gateway, which is a strategy for bringing together public and private investment and international cooperation with this purpose to generate value, not only to invest, not only to acquire, but to generate value. And this is what you need to help us read from the LEO, and therefore thanking CAF and the OCD and CEPAL for this cooperation that we always do. So close together and so solid from the scientific point of view. Thank you, you three.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's such a great honor to be here. Minister, Vice Minister, good to see you. And I want to begin by, like others, thank our co-authors for this event and for our good collaboration. ACLAC, dear Jose Manuel, EU, dear Felix, and CAF, of course, dear Veronica and Jessica, to all of you for organizing this. And it's a great pleasure for me to be here with you at this International Economic Forum for Latin America and the Caribbean, and to have the chance to present our Pride and Joy, the flagship report of the region, Latin American Economic Outlook. And it's very fitting to do it here in this forum, which brings together many voices that shape the region's development path. We have governments, we have international organizations, development banks, private sector partners. So we're all here facilitating a dialogue that is very important, especially at this day and age. And it also gives a powerful message. It gives the message that progress in LAC depends on dialogue, cooperation, and shared responsibility. And so we are all here and happy to present the outlook that reflects rigorous analysis and strong and enduring partnerships between our institution, which is very valuable. Latin America and the Caribbean occupy a central place in the work of the OECD Development Center, where I am director. More than a third of our members come from this region. We have 15 members from the Latin American Caribbean region, which shows the long-standing partnership, which is built on trust, policy dialogue, and a shared belief in the region's potential. Latin America and the Caribbean has a young and dynamic population, abundant natural resources, growing innovation ecosystem, and a strategic position in global value chains. In this forum, we've heard illuminating discussions about the vast development potential of the region. Yet, as we know, much of this potential still remains underused. Productivity gaps still persist, inequality remains high, and external shocks continue to test economic resilience. And this edition of the LEO speaks to this reality and examines how countries in LAC can transform their productive structures by building on their competitive strengths. It looks at how policy choices and financing tools can support this shift in ways that are inclusive, resilient, and forward-looking. The report also fits into a purposeful sequence in sync with previous editions, building a clear narrative. We always say that the LEO is not a standalone report. It's a conversation that continues, and we build on every report from the year, one year to another. And in 2027, which is next year, we will have done this for 20 years. We will be celebrating our 20th anniversary of the LEO in 2027. So stay tuned. We are going to do something very special during that anniversary year. But as I said, we're building a story. In 2020 and 2022, the LEO analyzed the potential of the digital transformation and the green transition as two key areas of opportunity for LAC. In 23, it explored what investments were needed to unlock the development potential of the region. In 2024, the report analyzed sources of finance for that investment agenda, and the 2025 edition takes one step further and focuses on how policies and financing instruments can work together to turn ambition into real change on the ground, making production transformation a driver of long-term development. I will not preempt this discussion that will follow, but let me very briefly point to two core messages from the report. First one being, unlocking the region's productive potential calls for strong and effective institutions. It requires sustainable finance, quality investments in sectors with future promise, continuous skills upgrading, and policy choices that place inclusion and sustainability at their center. Second point, improving the design, implementation, and financing of productive development policies is essential. Effective policies draw on multiple perspectives that bring together public and private actors, domestic and international finance, and national and regional perspectives. Again, collaboration is at the heart of the LEO. Again, I would like to warmly thank our co-authors and trusted partners in this project for your close collaboration on this 18th edition, and also for the future editions to come. This is a collective effort and reflects a shared vision that determines the region's future. Thank you. Over to you, Husman.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is a huge honor to be here with you and to present this 18th edition of the LEO report. This is the result of the collaboration between CAF and the European Union, and the scope of this region couldn't be more timely, which is the productive policies. I would like to especially thank our partners and road partners. I want to thank Felix, Rada, and we would like to present this report in a very decisive moment where there is a long-term trend that converging with a rupture moment, and they are both in the calling that we have in this 2025 to the different territories and countries in Latin America. This is a call to escalate and develop their productive capabilities from a new vision of these policies. What do I mean with this? They converge in this long trend with a rupture. The long trend is what we call the low capability to grow and transform phenomenon. This is the first trap of development that we've been identifying that we see in many countries of the region. And to give you a number, in the decade between 2014 to 2023, the growth of Latin America and the Caribbean was just 0.9%, less than half of 2% that the region grew in the missing region of the 80s. the missing decade. So that means that we finished on a second missing decade. So the question is, what do we have to do to avoid a third decade that is lost? And the answer is that we need to apply a new vision, a new modern of productive development policies. This long-term trend is added now to this moment that we have been speaking a lot in this important event that's defined by the rivalry between huge powers, and that's taken to a rupture of the world order as we knew it, as the minister Carney in Davos last week mentioned, of a system based on rules to govern globalization. We will walk slowly and then very fast to what is being rightfully called an instrumentalized interdependence, or a weaponized interdependence. That is the use of interventions in the flow of trade and in the access to technology and others to achieve security objectives, geopolitical objectives, or even political or extra-economical objectives. We have moved from a more transactional reality where relationships of power are not symmetric, and they have always been this way, but they are imposed, and they define the terrain of action instead of the aspiration, the type of system that the world was trying to build before. It was not perfect, but somehow a leveled terrain, a level playing field. This is about a world where, unfortunately, the wisdom applies that the powerful do what they can and the weak ones suffer what they owe. And the big question is, how can we browse this situation? That's the big question and the underlying text on the topic of this conference, which is how we can position Latin America in this new moment. It is clear that in the center of this geopolitical rivalry, there is a fierce competition for leadership or control in different sectors and specific technologies that's defined as strategic for the national security, even for its production of weapons, or simply in any type of central industry for international competitiveness. And the big reserves of minerals, of oil and gas, among other assets, makes Latin America to be a focus of attention and possible intervention or dispute in that new geopolitical reality. So my reflection is that the Leo 2025 is centered on the way we can drive and boost financial productive transformation. It's very important and highly sensitive. The strategies should incorporate a new reading, a new very intelligent analysis of the new geopolitical situation, so we know how to navigate it, to be at the table and not on the menu, as the Prime Minister said in Davos. The way to put these questions positively is to recognize the mission has important assets, and that's been being emphasized a lot here. And what's indispensable is to have strategies and clear policies, including each one of the big actors and markets of the world, the United States, Asia, to take advantage of the area assets. So, for example, assets are huge reserves of critical minerals, and our incredible biodiversity, the abundant water, and our important energy sources, are high capacity for producing food, and a population at a productive age who have more access to education. It is more than 660,000 million inhabitants that can participate in economies of scale. These are trans-Latin American companies who have different assets, and the benefits of these assets will not be developed, will not be spread automatically. We need to have a strategy with key goals given the new geopolitical situation. These agendas of political development, they include who are the investors, what are the finance sources, what are the technologies. These are all the questions that will require very important financial planning and strategic thinking. These are the capabilities that we need to strengthen. For example, and Felix is here, I cannot stop emphasizing what he mentioned, which is the strategic opportunity, which is the strategy of the gateway. This is a huge vehicle, so countries in the region, both governments and private sector, have a conversation with the European Union on business and of trade financing on a critical list of sectors. I would like to add one more reason, and with this, I will finish my intervention. This is a timely moment for the recommendations of this report after decades where the industrial policies or productive development policies were suspicious. Now they have been welcomed by different developed economies, particularly the United States. In the CEPAL, we believe it's the governance what defines success of these policies, public and private cooperation, instead of putting the subsidies or tariffs up front. This is how a new compilation of texts of different academics worldwide who recently was published by the London School of Economics under the title of the London Consensus Economic Principles for the 21st Century. And this is also suggested by the next post of the World Bank on industrial policies and different policies made by the Monetary Fund and the IDB. This is very positive. The hope is that governments of the region can develop a new consensus both in the practice on the necessity of developing these policies and what kind of productive policies are more effective in each context, country and region, and how to finance them, how to strengthen the institutional capabilities to put them into practice. This is the invitation to governments and societies that make this layout 2025, and this report is a tool, is a roadmap, is an invitation for dialogue and for action in a historic and decisive moment. Thank you very much. I would like to thank you for your participation, and we've split this panel in two parts, and therefore we've just finished our first part, and we will continue with the second part of the panel, perspectives, economic perspective, Latin America 2025, driving and financing productive transformation. I would like to invite Jessica Roldan, Director of Macroeconomic Studies in CAF, and also Juan Vasquez Zamora, the Attached Manager for Latin America and the Caribbean at the Center of Development of the OCDE, Marcos Ginas, Director of Productive Development of CEPAL, and Ana Guijarro Jimenez, Manager of Programs of IMPA Regional Programs for Latin America and the Caribbean, and the European Commission for the second part of this panel. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. This second part is our turn to present the ideas of the report and describe the roadmap. Here we have the presentation. Thank you very much. Let me tell you a little bit about what these coming minutes will be about. I'll be showing you some of the things that were mentioned before in the opening remarks, the diagnosis from the macroeconomic point of view, social, environmental point of view, of where the region is. The discussion of this report is so relevant right now. My colleagues from the co-author institutions will be talking about these pillars that Veronica mentioned on the way we can achieve this productive transformation in this report. So without further ado, I will talk about the first part. All right, so as it's been said, the region is on a important structural transformation of growth. In your screens you can see the growth in the region, the growth of the GDP of the region, And we can see how after the pandemic and having grown in an accelerated way during this year in 2024, 2025, they're pointing out at the acceleration of growth to potential levels that, as it was mentioned not long ago, are relatively low, 8 or 9%, and that contrast with the growth rates for advanced economies of 1.7%. These are clearly grow insufficient growth rates to close development gaps, and therefore in a very important way to reduce poverty in the region. As you can see, this behavior is analyzed throughout the different countries are that are part of Latin America and the Caribbean. Even when we talk about those that are specialized on exporting raw material, or those that are whose productive products have a more sophisticated composition. The figure or the picture is basically the same for all the region. Let me move forward on the presentation. Exactly. And a way to see this, or an important piece of information in this low productivity image and low competitiveness in the region, we can see the export of countries, of our countries. On your screen, you can see 25 economies. We talk about what is the composition of the export of machines per economic profile. And what I would like to highlight here is that more than 75% of the countries that are here shown are specialized on exporting primary products or low technology products. I'm talking about the green and orange areas of these bars that you can see. What does it mean? Well, it means that when the region is centered on producing on very low added value sectors, well, you have the adoption of technology, of capabilities to face the challenges of the modern world. And even the susceptibility of the region to crushes of the natural disasters, and the like is important. Another important thing to highlight is that a big number of countries is focused on exporting primary products, which make them less diversified but very susceptible to global prices of raw materials. So in this regard, something very important to highlight here, and just the reason of the report, is this necessity of diversifying the productive structure of economies. Not just diversifying it, but make it more inclusive, more sustainable, and more prepared for the necessities of the modern world. This productive structure that the region has, it feeds back the quality of the labor market. That is to say, both the labor market and the productive capabilities and the structure have a conversation with each other. So this makes now that market is not very dynamic. Nowadays, one of each two Latin Americas work in informal context. They don't have social security, and this type of tasks or jobs is associated with a vulnerability both for homes and individuals in terms of their income and in terms of what is it that could be planned for the future. And in connection to this productive structure, we have the fact that the region is characterized by having jobs that, in generally speaking, dedicate quite very little on technology. In particular, what we see here in this graph is that participation jobs on the technological intensity, it points out that very few jobs in the region, which are the highest paid, 150% average, those workers that are dedicated to work in these sectors make about 300 more than the average of the rest of workers in the different countries. is very low in the region. So we are talking about a percentage of 2 and 6% of associated works to new technologies. This generates also in this vicious cycle where there is you don't see the necessary measures to adopt technology and to feed the markets with what they should be prepared, with what they should have. And here we conclude this idea of having a productive structure that's more competitive. That, and as we mentioned before, it reinforces the idea of a productive transformation that is efficient, that generates value, but it also should be focused on other several important elements that cannot be acquired in an exclusive or parallel way. They should be integrated. I'm talking about the environmental topic. The region faces or has faced 2000 between 2000 and 2024 many extreme climate events, and this number has grown during the last 25 years, exposing the evident susceptibility of the region to climate change and climate phenomena, taking into account that the productive capabilities should be very resilient and should seek sustainability and to take advantage of these capitals that were mentioned at the beginning of this talk. And let me conclude by saying and by talking about that part of the energy and the energy asset that we have in the presentation. We can see how the region has a matrix of energy production that's very centered on the use of renewable sources. Is it's very superior, more than 30% globally. So this is one of the elements that is highlighted by the report, where you will need to center this productive investment. Up next, my colleagues will take the floor. Thank you very much. Well, thank you all for being here. Thank you all for being online, as we've mentioned before, addressing that challenge of a productivity that's been stuck and decreasing during the last few decades will require a productive transformation of our economies. And that transformation will not take place in a spontaneous fashion. It requires explicit policies, deliberate policies, and this is why we're making this calling to escalate productive development policies, while with a new vision of these policies. As Veronica mentioned at the beginning, these policies understand how combining efforts, horizontal and transversal efforts that impact all the sectors of the economy, but it should also bring vertical efforts that are specific to some sectors. And second position, this new vision calls for this new policies not to only cover the industrial sector. That this is why we're not talking about industrial policies, but about development, because these policies could cover the agro sector, services, a mining sector, any sector could be subject to these policies. Having said that, we have been insisting on the need and in the importance of establishing priorities, productive priorities on sectors that are strategic and the LEO proposes a series of sectors that could be reference for countries and their territories when establishing these priorities. And it is also understood under this vision, these new policies mainly as a collaborative effort among different actors of the public and private sector, of the academy, of the civil society, to address those obstacles when it comes to productive transformation. And understanding these policies and the idea of governance for productive development is the center. And additionally, under this vision, we believe that an important part of the vision for development growth should take place locally and subnationally. This is why the protagonism of governments is important in these agendas. These policies, in turn, also need to bring efforts in different fronts. The CEPAL secretary said we need to work on science, technology, innovation, different types of technology, different entrepreneurship, and human talent, attraction, investment, and we need to find how ways to maximize the impact of that financing. And also, under this new vision, we are aiming at a new scope to make them more international. We're not talking about policies that are so protectionist of the past. And very importantly, we do believe that a concrete and effective way to organize the efforts in terms of productive development are the initiatives that are named cluster and other initiatives of production. And it's worth mentioning that there are more than 700 of these initiatives, and we need to see how we link them to these policies. Now our region doesn't start from zero with these policies. Just to mention, to give you a few examples, we can see how Brazil had started with a new industry, and Mexico released their first Mexico plan. Colombia has been working with their new policy of reindustrialization. Chile has been working on a program for productive development that is sustainable. While these efforts have been taking place in our region, we see great opportunities for improvement. And here we presented how, from the fiscal point of view, our efforts are still marginalized compared to what other countries have been doing, countries from the OCDE, and also for their nature. These are policies that are intensive in coordination, and we see that a lot of efforts that have not been coordinated through different ministries and through different agencies and at different levels that we need to articulate and coordinate in the framework of these policies. And also, there is a heterogeneous level of the quality on the efforts that subnationally are taking place in our countries. And for that purpose, let's say to escalate and to adjust these LEO policies, as Veronica mentioned at the beginning of the talk, they propose a series of recommendations, concrete recommendations in terms of development, productive development. If you help us with the presentation, but first place, well, the LEO proposes a series of recommendations to escalate and to improve these policies. And in second position, it proposes a whole series of recommendations to strengthen the multi-level governance of multiple sectors. And in third position, it proposes a series of recommendations to strengthen the capabilities, or the technical and operational capabilities, political capabilities that the officials need, those officials who implement these efforts. And also, the LEO proposes a series of recommendations to develop and to align these efforts on the strategic sectors from initiatives plus. And we highly recommend to drive and to work on the commitment of the actors, especially from the private sector. And in the framework of these policies, we also propose different recommendations to dive into the segregation of these efforts. And there is a series of recommendations for addressing that scope of internationalization. We're convinced that only if our countries and their regions escalate in these policies, we will be able to move the needle of productivity in our regions, and by the end of the day, we will be able to achieve higher levels of well-being for our people. That, as we always say, it is what this conversation is about. Please take the floor, Mr. Juan.
All right. I want to make sure that you can hear me. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much, Jessica and Marco, for the presentation. Welcome to the LEO. I see familiar faces, friends that have never been with us in the LEO. I hope that after this you can follow this publication. Jessica has told us why the region needs to transform the productive structure and why we need to advance towards higher productivity models. Marco explained that this it won't happen all of a sudden. We need public places to walk towards that. I'm going to answer a question that everyone is asking themselves. How can we make sure that we can make that, and what about the investments, the funding that is needed? For that, I want to share big messages with you. The first one, we need investment. That is evident. We also need to attract foreign investment, not just the domestic ones, but also foreign. Why? Because when we see this data, the data makes a provides foundation to this idea. The situation in Latin America, of course, we have an increase, in this case of 0.05% of the exports, a diversification of exports. Some other aspects that we have not calculated, such as the competences acquired by the transferred technology towards the productive system. Another important element is the foreign direct investment, which is fundamental. A second message is connected. Where are the resources coming from for investment? But once again, they should not come just from abroad, but also from the inside, from the house. It's also from the private sector and the public sector. So that's why we need to think about the tax services and also the capacity that the countries might have to collect that in public investment. So we need first to collect taxes for those investments, but also for the tax system to incentivize investment, private activity, innovation, entrepreneurship. So we need to align these two political goals. This is lesser and lesser in the Latin American versus the OCDE. We have had many advances in the last years. However, once we see what is happening behind this tax structure, we see that the effective load on the entrepreneur sector is relatively high once we compare that with the OCDE. So that's why we need to have a better design of the tax system for the sectors that can really push the economy. They can get incentives, and they are not just stopping their entrepreneurships due to the tax load. Through all this discussion, this is the third message that I want to share with you. The tax incentives to attract investments are critical, and they should be better designed. We believe that there is an opportunity for a better design. Of course, it is a very useful tool that is useful to transform many countries and very useful also to attract investment. But the design still requires some adjustments. I do not pretend that you understand this live, and you are, because it's hard to read, but I want you to keep this message with you. In the horizontal axis, we have the productive sectors of LATAM, and the vertical, we have the countries of LATAM. And what you can see in the darker squares is that some countries have more than one incentive in the same sector. Perhaps we might have opportunities to provide coherence and harmonization into those areas. We can have overlapping, or perhaps they can just work against. We need to apply this with investments that we won't be able to get unless they have the incentives. So once again, that's another important message that I wanted to share with you. Fourth message, we must be creative, involving new stakeholders so we can fund this productive transformation. In a forum like this one, it looks like what I'm going to say is obvious. However, the importance of the development of banking, but not just the regional or the multilateral one, the national and this subnational one of development. We can see in this study, the LEO study, that these development banks are playing a very important role for the development at the regional level as well. And also, we feel that they need to provide a better technical support to the private sector so they can access to credit, so they can structure investment projects, even to issue on the stock market. And also financial projects such as the green, the blue, the social bonds. Those are useful, innovative tools, and the region has been a pioneer in the use of these tools. This is one of the regions that had advanced the most in this area. This is a funding that also connected with goals of development that are quite specific. That's why we believe that this is a very important tool, as long as we can really monitor that the funds are being used for those goals. The last message is the importance of development of the capitals and also the integration, financial integration the level of the region. So the average is lower versus the OCDE and is funded through the banking system. However, we do have a margin to use a different type of strategies that are more sophisticated that can support in a much more direct way the productor level through the market, the stock market. The last message that I want to share with you is the importance of the financial regional strategy integration so we can bring a diversity of investors. So with this, I'm closing my part and then I'm going to give the floor to my colleague here. Thank you very much. Following the fourth chapter, beyond the economic data that my colleagues have expressed, I want to summarize a little bit, based on the importance of the cooperation. We want to highlight it at the regional level and international level. So in this chapter, you can truly see beyond the financial data and the need of having more international investment in the region, it is important also to establish policies that can facilitate this integration, highlighting the priorities and with policies that can actually back them up. There are so many examples that can support the productive development, such as to foster or to work more integrated supply chains for the region. And we were talking about we were hearing about this case, the relationship between Panama and Colombia, as one of the exemplary cases where we can see work between the governments on that. Secondly, this is also using the I+D strategy with all the development centers of the regions and the countries as well, encouraging the commitment of the private sector as well, using technologies as well, adopting new technologies that for this case will be useful for the use of mechanisms in certain countries, for example, data transfer or sharing data or even infrastructure. That is the example of the submarine cables. Also, the green transformation, which is a very important, natural resources, such as in the Amazonian, the green ports, the corridors, sea corridors, that also need a shared resources, because we truly share those resources. Is not just an initiative of the country, but the initiative that impacts the whole region, Latin America and the Caribbean. And also the normalization of the regulations, including the type of norms as well. And then we have the number six, which is important, of trade agreements. Of course, from the European Commission, we have one with the Mercosur, with other institutions such as CARICOM and many others that we have in this integration. We also want to highlight, as my colleagues have expressed, in the European Commission, we do have initiatives that put up to the service of the sustainable development a shared strategy that will be the global view strategy. This strategy allows us to use private and public resources, so those can be invested in strategic priorities for the region, such as the sustainable transport, the sustainable energy, education, and so on and so forth. So with this, we need to highlight the approach of 360 grades, meaning that we are not always supporting strategies, but we are also doing it in a cross-cutting way in 360 strategy that will be distributed in all the characteristic bar in regulation, in with the use of human resources, transgender, and so on and so forth. So this is highlighted, and there are also the priorities and all the practices in the European Union and with all the associations that we have in the region that we are using, so we can help the sustainable transformation that is expressed in the report. On behalf of my colleagues, we want to thank you all and the organizations that have been with us, especially throughout this year that took us to draft the report, for your attention, for reading the report. let us know if you have any comment or any doubts about it. We're going to be available around, and thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you
you very
very
much.
much. We will continue with the next panel in a few minutes.
The Adam Smith Center for Economic Freedom. You don't just learn, you achieve. Through our interdisciplinary Bachelor of Science in Business and Government Leadership, you'll gain perspective, innovate, and connect with real world leaders.
It starts with me.
It starts with me.
It starts with me. It starts with you.
Leadership starts here. The Adam Smith Center for Economic Freedom at Florida International University. Exploring the intersection of government policy and the free market to offer a better understanding of the free enterprise system and its impact on human prosperity around the world. Founded in 2020 by Governor Ron DeSantis and the Florida legislature to promote education and mentorship through multidisciplinary programs and fellowships, we empower students in public policy and free enterprise. We conduct cutting-edge research on political and economic systems, host global conferences and seminars, and improve public policy by providing informed analysis to decision makers. At the Adam Smith Center, we blend knowledge and action to shape a prosperous, free future and foster a vibrant community of leaders. We inform, innovate, influence, inspire. The Adam Smith Center for Economic Freedom at FIU.
dos, ¿sí? Los invitamos a que tomen asiento.
I want to invite you, please, to take your seats so we can continue with the next panel.
Exploring the intersection of government policy and the free market to offer a better understanding of the free enterprise system and its impact on human prosperity around the world. Founded in 2020 by Governor Ron DeSantis and the Florida legislature to promote education and mentorship through multidisciplinary programs and fellowships, we empower students in public policy and free enterprise. We conduct cutting-edge research on political.
We will continue. This is the second panel for this afternoon, boosting tourism investment for the region. With this, we want to welcome Eduardo Campos, Senior Executive for Infrastructure and Development, the moderator of this panel, boosting tourism investment in Latin America and the Caribbean. Natalia Bayona will be the moderator, Executive Director of UN Tourism, and also Donna Reyes Prosper, General Secretary and CEO of the Caribbean Tourism Organization, Monica Salaquet, Executive President of the Federation of Tourism Enterprises in Chile, Jerez Brisket, Minister of Tourism of Guatemala, and Ricardo Bachelet, Coordinator of Investments of the Ministry of Tourism in Brazil. We want to welcome Eduardo Campo to the stage. He will introduce the panel. Let's give him a warm welcome. And welcome. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for being here on the second day of the International Economic Forum in Panama, the third one, if we include as well the Festival of Ideas and Culture that started the 27th. Global tourism made the hardest part and is back. In 2025 was the year of the full recovery. We needed 5 years to return back to the figures of international travelers that we had in 2019 before COVID. In many countries, Latin America and the Caribbean, we were able to achieve this just in 2 years. From now, we will have a fast growth of the travel industry and tourism. We heard about this yesterday on behalf of the COPA president. In the next 15 years, we'll double the air traffic. Then we need to add as well that the people will have more time for more travels and larger ones, thanks to the remote working possibility, and also the growth of the senior citizens and also retired ones that are looking for longer and larger trips. We need to highlight that the global travelers are looking for destinations of sustainable nature, cultural destinations, without losing the sight on the tourism of sun and beach. Latin America offers a perfect opportunity for this type of demand. Latin America has the largest biodiversity in the planet, which represents 50% of the biodiversity globally. We have a huge global wealth, ancestral, cultural, gastronomy, archaeology, as well as religious one, and also the best beaches in the world for the Caribbean. These projections of travels and grow in terms of the tourist flow tourism requires an important effort on behalf from the private sector and the government because the growth will be distributed and whomever is better prepared receive better, whomever prepares better will receive more offer and they can also receive better investment. And this panel is about this because here in Latin America and the Caribbean we have all the attractions, but these are not always touristic products. Then what it is the use of having the best beaches and the best natural parks if we don't have access points, approaching boys. We don't have the ports, if we don't have the airports that are needed. Precisely, we're working on that at this point, converting the attraction into a product. 2 years ago, we created the direction of sustainable tourism, working with a comprehensive approach, thinking about the instrument financial tools with different type of elements and also the function itself. We have 5 approach. First, to foster the economy and the infrastructure, meaning airports, ports, and all the infrastructure needed. The next one is the capacity on the economy industry. The next one is elements for the industry, and the next one is policies, and the last one is the pre-investment for the structure of these projects so we can ensure the success of these projects. We have not done this alone. We have done also with auto tourism. In the last 2 years with these organizations we have been able to promote investments, development 10 guidelines of investment for 10 countries around the region that were launched, presented last year in the most important, last week in the most important tourism fair. And now we have the Natalia Bayona, which is the moderator of this panel, showing different type of projects that have been identified and all of these strategies. So in this way, having this in mind, we hope after this panel to get recommendations, we can have a higher impact on the tourism industry, so we can generate more employment for young people, for women, so we can ensure shared wealth for everyone in our territories. Thank you so much and welcome. All right. Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. So excited about seeing so many Latin American friends we can strengthen the future, and also friends, the panelists, which are the high level panels that we have today. Let's give them a big applause at the Ministry of Tourism of Guatemala. Another great friend of the House of Enoturismo, Deputy Secretary of Tourism of the Tourism of Chile, and today the representative before the private sector, our beloved Monica Salaquet. Let's give her a big applause. Our beloved advisor for the government, Sergio. He has been a very important person in the government of Brazil, the Ministry of Tourism, so we can make progress on all the incentives to the private sector for the investment as well. So Sergio, please join us, please.
Last but not least, I would like to switch to English to give the opportunity to Ms. Donna Regis, Secretary General, for tourism in the Caribbean. Donna, it's my pleasure to be here with you today. Como lo decía nuestro
As our beloved Eduardo was saying, can you hear me? This one is not working. Can you hear us? Half of the panel can hear us, and the half of the panel is not working. So we just can't start. It's perfect sweet spot to start. As Eduardo was saying, effectively, part of what we are doing right now between ONU, UN Tourism, and the CAF is to create a culture of investment. So Latin America looks united, not just thanks to the biodiversity and the positive framework that we are going through right now in Latin America. Around 2006, 2007, when I started working, I was told about the strategic pillars to attract investment to Colombia: security and trust. Today, more than ever, tourism it is that tool of social cohesion in Latin America. It is that tool that helps the countries of Latin America and the Caribbean to leave the poverty behind through the indigenous communitarianism, tourism, as well our biodiversity as well. It's so clear for us in the UN tourism that the region that is growing, we have some countries that are growing. Paraguay is not here, but the growth is more than 90%. We do have some countries such as Guatemala. Its president has this strategic vision of generating some policies of states, connectivity aiming towards the tourism. And I can go deep in each one of those. In UN tourism, we opened the regional office for Las Americas to focus on the foreign investment. And then in Chile, we developed and supported with each one of the countries on the strengthening of this culture of investment. After creating the guidelines of investment with the CAF, we are on the second phase, which is supporting the governments and the countries to create new incentives for the investment, not just in terms of tax or fiscal ones, but also incentives so the investors can feel that the governments are betting for education, human capital, incentives, so through the sovereign funds they can invest and risk through tourism, so they can see this region as a region that has a commitment and a banking culture regarding investment. Now, I want to give the floor to our beloved Ministry of Guatemala, beloved Harris. I want to share something that I loved, because that is the power of tourism. Harris, before being the Minister of Tourism, he was journalist in CNN. So he, better than no one, can really talk about trust and how we can promote a country outside the borders. We were listening yesterday to the President of Guatemala explaining the strategic plan that is being done in Guatemala. I want you please to share with our audience about the vision that you have and Guatemala, the current situation as for tourism. Natalia, it's always a pleasure to see you. Thank you so much for the presentation. Good afternoon. Yes, what the President Arevalo was trying, was aiming, and he told me before getting into the office is that he said that he wanted to use the tourism as one of the most important engines of development of the country for the country. And he told me, do not think just in 4 years term, think about 20 years. That's what he told me once I took the office as well. So we need to think about an enlightenment. We can think about tourism just as a word related with the promotion of the country or just developing a product. We need to take it as a decision for the country. In December of last year, he elevated tourism towards a presidential goal. This is one of the 8 presidential goals that will be the focus of the next 2 years. So that is becoming us into a very important axis of the policies, and is very important. We know that the tourism has a very cross-cutting effects, and that's why we want to work and make all the efforts in everything that can have a multilateral and different level effects. So that's why here we're strengthening infrastructure, using digital transformation, using different type of strategies that can really be aligned instead of having isolated strategies. So then they are not just selling isolated destinations, but it's fully integrated with the destinations and the territories. We work closely with groups of self-management at the local level that are even more empowered right now because they truly believe that they are part of a larger strategy. And this is a state policy up to coming from the highest level. Thank you very much, Harris. And now let's look up towards the private sector. Monica, you were Deputy Secretary of the Chilean government, and now you are representing the private sector. What do you think about Latin America and the Caribbean? What about the challenges that you see so we can strengthen the investment in tourism? First of all, it is a pleasure. So happy to see you, Natalia, and thank you so much for the invitation. Effectively, I see that Latin America has an important opportunity in terms of touristic development because it is clear that we have cultural patrimony that it makes us immensely attractive, but we do have risk. We are perceived as a continent with high risk once we think important investors. Investors require certainty, and that's where our countries still need to work hardly. Certainty in terms of regulations. We have changes in regulations on the environmental affairs, concession, soil use, and that creates a lot of uncertainty before the investors. We need to consolidate the institutions, governmental institution. There are many areas involved in tourism. Who defines the regulations, the norms? Who really acts on the territory? We need an enabler state. We can have an important, a big tourism industry, but the state should ensure connectivity by air, by land, access to health in a relatively short term. So the PPP, it becomes then into a very important element, and many other countries cannot really ensure that. We also need to think about creating a catalog of integrated products. We have many isolated products, but we need to strengthen a better integrated catalog. And sometimes when we spoke with the ministry about this, we need to think about the integration of our countries. Sometimes we look towards Asia or Europe, where we have the high expenders, tourists, once they come to Latin America, but we also need to offer integrated products. And I believe that we have a challenge for our countries in that area. Thank you very much, Monica. Now let's move to my mix of Portuguese and Spanish. Dear Ricardo, so happy having you here. In Brazil, we opened the UN Tourism Office focused on the promotion of investments. Last year, we were together with CAF, also during COP, and thanks to that, we were able to strengthen agreements so we can strengthen as well green investments in a country such as Brazil. You have been a critical element so we can create incentives for the investments. And can you tell us the current situation of Brazil and why this is a very important platform? Thank you very much, Natalia. Good afternoon, everyone. The mission of the Ministry of Tourism of Brazil, Mr. Gustavo Feliciano, the one that he trusted me, is to attract and to promote the private investment for tourism in Brazil. We have a group of policies and regulations, as my Chilean colleague has just said. They are integrated and long-term ones that we created to achieve the results that we have right now in Brazil. I was reflecting on this year's forum, which is how we can position Latin America in the world. A world that is changing constantly due to the climate crisis, due to the technological revolution, the 4.0 industry, the digitalization, economic crisis, and a path that we are betting to go on to follow in Brazil is the tourism pathway. Tourism and artificial intelligence and the augmented reality do not replace the real experience, the physical experience of tourism. Hospitality cannot be replaced by a robot or by any other mechanism. So this is a policy. It is also a sector that generates also revenue with social inclusion. We have a government that gave us guidelines for the sustainable development in the environmental level, but also social inclusion, gender equality, and tourism is very important to achieve that. In Brazil, women, most of them work in tourism. I would say 54.7% of the entrepreneurs in tourism are women. In hospitality, they represent more or less 60%. Also for the small entrepreneurs, the small businesses, 94%, and 97% of the businesses, pymes, as MMEs, as MBs, as we call it here as well, those are also women. So for that, we need private sector as well, and that's what we do in our ministry with the support of partnerships such as the UN Tourism and the CAF, for example. We launched a guidance of investment of tourism that has a portfolio not just of guidelines, analysis, market intelligence, or trends, legal frameworks. But also last year in Brazil, we created a new General Act of Tourism for the whole sector that regulates the activities. This is a legal framework that is modern, with less bureaucracy and more foreseeability for the investment and businesses. So the guidelines of the CAF and UN Tourism has been very useful to guide investors. And the guidelines also contains a portfolio of 23 projects that were selected, projects well structured, with a master plan, with an infrastructure, all added services as well. And on top of that, should be profitable. So those are projects, and the sector, the last data, the tourism sector in Brazil is growing around 30% yearly, and that has been the trend for the last 4 or 3 years. We do have a record for international tourism, 9 million, almost double of the last 10 years. So this is a promising potential and very profitable growth. Thank you very much. Effectively, a big part of the challenges once we faced the investors for Latin America, the largest investment in Latin America is Spain. There is no doubt about it, and United States on the second place. Normally speaking, once we're talking with investors, they are always telling us one of the largest challenges in Latin America is to find projects that can be fundable / that they can go through the fast due diligence. So this is a big step, a big leap, even if, believe it or not, in the sector, because we are coming from creating tools and projects that can have a tangible project that can have a real investment return, and that's very important.
So as part of the data that we have in UN tourism, last year, the Americas received 218 million international tourists. That's more or less 13% of the international tourists worldwide. And I would say that in the Caribbean, of course, we have a strong opportunity because the small islands destinations in the world, they more or less account 50% or more of their GDP thanks to tourism. So doing the things properly with the communities, preserving heritage and building new products is as well another opportunity for investors to maximize the impact. So without further ado, I want to ask the Secretary General from CTO, from your perspective, what is that value creation that the Caribbean can bring to investors so that they can see the Caribbean as an opportunity?
Okay, gracias, buenos tardes. Now I will switch to English because that's the only Spanish that I know. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this opportunity and inviting the Caribbean to speak about tourism. Tourism for us is very important, as you rightly said. Several of our destinations depend on tourism, some as much as 80% of our GDP. Having said that, we look at value in several ways. Three essential ways is firstly, focusing on value creation and not only volumes, in that we're not only focused on the amount of people who came. The people who came matter, yes, but the impact that they had, how much did they spend? What are the connections that they made? Are they going to be return visitors? Secondly, when they do come, to maximize the impact in terms of the revenue impact. Thirdly, looking at resilience in terms of embedding it into how we do business, into how we build our infrastructure. We see tourism not only in terms of promotions, but in terms of positioning. How do we position tourism to ensure that it benefits the citizens of this region? Our visitor arrivals for 2025 is upwards of 60 million if you look at both cruise and stayover. In addition to that, there are 40 plus million people who live in the region. So collectively, as a bloc, we're a significant group, and not necessarily small markets, but when we combine our natural products, our creative abilities, and also our people power, it is a significant investment block.
Thank you, Donna. Ahora de nuevo en español. Hay un proyecto que a mí me ha encantado.
There's a project that I have loved. I have been intoxicated just once in my life, and that's why I was not able to reach Guatemala. But something that I loved of all the work that we have done with CAF is to think about working in tourism for the indigenous tourism. So for all the startups, all the entrepreneurs, for them to truly believe in the indigenous tourism, so they sent the proposals, and the winners were able to have the presentations in Guatemala in the World Day of the Indigenous Communities. But mainly, one of the things that were most impactful for me was to see the president of CAF, and the Guatemalan president, together with Minister Harris, telling the stories of one of the amazing thing. And another thing that I saw there is that all the countries, Mexico, Argentina, absolutely all of them participated, and that made me think that we are doing the things, we are on the right path, bringing the communities, including them in the conversation to find ways to develop tourism. So that's why we are so passionate about community affairs and all these levels, and that's why we can see all that. Can you please share with us everything that has been done in Guatemala to achieve that? This was not a hard decision. Guatemala is mainly populated by indigenous people with more than 3,000 history. And it was just natural for us to think that the way to energize the sector, to bring more visitors, is to add a value to that, not to use as a tool be solved. I'm going to remove this because I'm listening to myself and I'm getting all confused here. However, the idea after this idea and everything that is very distinguishable for us is this connection with 3,000 years. So how we can create that as a value, how we do it, we ask to the communities, which one do you think would be the best way to represent yourselves? And then we, as country, as government, we help them with the management, the communities as a tourism product. So we did this, going with tours through all the country. As an authority, we have conversations with the community leaders, and we ask them about where they see themselves and the way they felt we could help them. Thanks to that, we create an important amount, a big amount of community projects. Once you see them all together, you can see that Guatemala can actually be a very authentic touristic product. That's what we're looking for. Authenticity. We have more than 30 volcans, we have beach, we have nature, we have the jungle, we have the mountain, but we also have 3,000 years of history. And you can see them today. That was critical. And this year we created a master plan of tourism. We did that with the support of UN Tourism, and we developed this with the communities. We created more than 70 participative workshops with more than 2,000 people share their insights. So we, at the technical level, were able to create this tourism plan. Once again, that's what it's making it real and authentic. I'm coming from journalism, so authenticity is critical for me, and that is actually the thing that has made us very unique in the region. Thank you, beloved Ricardo. I went 3 times to Brazil, not just once, 3 times. It's unbelievable how the country has been able to strengthen the tourism almost up for two times. You will share with us later on, but it's clear once you have a clear policy from the state that the change is critical. Once the tourism ministry gets this is strengthened from a budgeting level, creation departments, for example, like the promotion of investment, education, so on and so forth. Can you share with us the trends? Because what is clear is that anytime I go to Brazil, I can see a new restaurant, I can see gastronomy that is the same, but it is more exposed to the visitors, so we can understand everything that is behind the traditional food and gastronomy. Can you tell us how were you able to achieve these figures in a record time? Thank you. That is a group of measures. There are a group of measures that were taken to achieve these goals. As Natalia has explained, tourism based on communities with the valorization of the traditional communities, the native people in Brazil. That is also all of that is also a priority for the Brazilian government in the sector of tourism. As the Ministry of Government said, we do politics as well by constantly in conversation, dialogue with the communities, with the social sectors and the private sector. All the companies involved in the tourism industry. Now, tourism is getting a value in the SEG type of products with a good social and environmental governance, and also adding also value, providing the word the value, the just value to the indigenous communities as well. So the social and the environmental approach is very important. So these can be we can develop the infrastructure and also the people through the training and the education, so they can really start with this type of strategy. This is virtuous cycle, because once you create more, you have more tourism, then you have more entrepreneurs, you can get more. The whole hospitality chain industry is there, so one affects the other. This is an interesting cycle. Once we have these investments for the growth, a good macro economy, regulations stability, political stability, and the judicial stability as well. Thank you very much. And that is exactly the situation. Security, trust, and safety in here is not just to have zero homicides or these type of indicators. Safety is also safety in terms of the law, stability, and at the end of the day, the investor is the pillar. And that is very clear when you see the investment figures around the world, and the investment on real estate has fallen radically, and that is part to the tariff pressures. The tariffs in tourism, the only one is actually the visa. That is the only tax that we pay once we travel. However, from that's why it's so important once we don't have safety, then investors are investing in other areas, technology, defense, no doubt about it, strategic pillars. And this is the moment that we all have to strengthen the investment culture. And regarding that,
Donna, you represent 25 member states from the Caribbean. I love after panels to have quick action on everything. You know, it's not just a panel. So I need you to task me and to task Eduardo. So how we can help you to create bankable projects. So at the end of the day that we can bring proper investors to those 25 amazing destinations.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that question. And first of all, I want to recognize the interventions that you're already making. As I mentioned before, the Caribbean is a significant bloc. Amongst our 25 members from Bahamas to the north to Guyana to the south, it is a significant investment bloc, and there are significant opportunities. We recently relaunched our strategic plan, and we have coined it a reimagined plan. And what it does is redefine tourism, looking at tourism not as the traditional sun-lost destinations in the Caribbean, but sun-plus. And what that means is that we're moving beyond the three traditional S's and recognizing that, yes, it's the base of our product, but we have other aspects of our product and our experiences that we build in. The first is community-based tourism, looking at authentic experiences. And we're looking at our culinary, looking at our orange economy in terms of our culture, our entertainment, and showcasing that, looking at sports tourism, looking at health tourism. These are some niche markets that we are growing, and we're seeing significant strides in our destinations, but certainly with partners across the regions, with partners such as UN Tourism, with partners from our Latin American brothers and sisters. We look at you as partners, yes, but we also look towards you as source markets as well. So, and we've made strides in that area. So even areas where we could share language skills. We teach you English, you teach us Spanish or Portuguese. We see that as opportunities to strengthen what we do in the Caribbean as we build our economy, as we move, as I indicated before, from simple tourism promotion to tourism positioning.
Thank you, Donna. And you got an amazing point to finish the panel. Los que me han escuchado al menos una vez saben mi obsesión sobre la educación. No existe.
Those who heard me once, you know about my obsession with education. There is no possibility of this sector to move forward if there is no investment on people, because it is the most humane sector of all. And with this, I would like to close. Monica, you also have that passion for education, right? Where do you see the biggest opportunities so we can, along with CAF, you can work on the training on people? Well, definitely this is a fundamental thing, and I would like to highlight something here, Natalia. I think that all the definitions that Brazil has taken during the last few years have been the result that we see nowadays. Chile and Brazil, we received the same number of tourists before the pandemic, and now Brazil is above 9 million people. And when the minister was telling me about all these public policies that they have implemented, I had to see how they can be translated into a greater number of arrivals. Tourism is a sector that requires human capital that is trained, and we have a gap there in our countries. We need to implement programs in terms of digitalization, in terms of hospitality, in terms of innovation as well. And I think that we have the opportunity to work in a very interesting way with the tourism agencies, with you, once we implemented, right, some projects that were destined to strengthening human capital. And that's one of the greatest challenges that we have in the private sector. Let's remember that as this is an industry with a marked as a series of periods for Latin America, especially, there is high rotation and very frequent rotation, and this is why we need to break that attrition and also training human capital that work for the sector. And when we talk about human capital, this is not only about the public sector. I always ask the private sector, how many of the hotel owners or travel agencies have within their plans to train at least once a year in the different topics to their staff? Because I remember two things, and with this we have just 2 minutes. But this I would like to wrap up. First, tourism is the greatest employer of young people in the world, but most of those people have just secondary school. Countries from the OECD, mature countries in economic maturity, 2/3 of the workers in general just have secondary school. It is very important, not that for the tourist there is a good service, but also that from the private sector, both for governments, you can see those investments, those incentives for investors, because a project is not made in 2 or 6 months. It's made in 5 months. The investor needs to have the guarantee that his staff will be trained from the first moment. But we should also give continuity to the project, and we're working on that. We hope that very soon we will be able to promote this study that we're working on through our regional office in the Americas, which is how can we help the private sector to create new incentives so the human capital, or to retain human capital, so they do not migrate to other sectors such as retail or massive consumerism. But also, what are the new incentives that need to be generated from the government, such as the special economic zones? I always say this: Latin America and the Caribbean has 500 free trade zones, and only 3 are touristic. 2 in Dominican Republic, 1 in Cartagena, the Four Seasons. We need to migrate a little bit more, as other countries have made. They've been able to create through the free trade zones. They have created ecosystems, so there is high quality job creation around a new development of tourism. We have just 48 seconds, so dear Eduardo, I think we complied. I think this is the very first time, mind you, that I'm in a panel where all the Americas are represented. We have the Caribbean, we have Brazil, we have South America, Central America, and the different cities. Thank you all. In a few minutes, we will continue with the next panel.
Smith Center for Economic Freedom at Florida International University. Exploring the intersection of government policy and the free market to offer a better understanding of the free enterprise system and its impact on human prosperity around the world. Founded in 2020 by Governor Ron DeSantis and the Florida legislature to promote education and mentorship through multidisciplinary programs and fellowships, we empower students in public policy and free enterprise. We conduct cutting-edge research on political and economic systems, host global conferences and seminars, and improve public policy by providing informed analysis to decision makers. At the Adam Smith Center, we blend knowledge and action to shape a prosperous, free future and foster a vibrant community of leaders. We inform, innovate, influence, inspire. The Adam Smith Center for Economic Freedom at FIU.
Y continuamos con el próximo panel desde la sala LAC Inspira en este foro económico internacional.
We continue with the next panel from the Inspira room. I would like to remind you all that you can share your experiences with the hashtag Economic Forum CAF, and you can follow us on social media in X, Facebook, and Instagram. Up next, we will have the opportunity to listen to the conversation of special trade zones and productive development regional experiences. Please welcome Juan Carlos Elorza, Director of Technical Analysis of CAF, who will be introducing the next panel. A round of applause for him. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Juan Carlos Elorza. I am the Director of Technical and Sectorial Analysis and Vice Presidency of CAF. I would like to thank you again for being here. We consider this is such an important and necessary space in this moment that we are experiencing. For us, the spaces that foster trading and markets is a fundamental core of our objectives. Special trade zones are again very relevant in the discussion, in the debate, due to something that you are well aware of: the reorganization of international trade. While it is for international tensions, for tensions or changes in terms of society and climate, today give us the roadmap or the magnifying glass on special economic trade zones. In this panel that we have today, we have a lot of specialists very relevant in this area. We would like to have a conversation, a very pragmatic conversation on what are the key success elements of that tool as an instrument for promoting productivity and trading, of technological transfers, for quality job generation, for currency generation, etc., and of course of integration of value chains that are more sophisticated for our region. From CAF, we support countries in the development of these type of instruments, and not only with the technical support, but also with different financial products that benefit governments and companies. I would like to take this opportunity. I will not take a long time. I would like to give the floor to Yolanda Sandoval. She's a journalist and economic editor of the press here in Panama. Yolanda, please take the floor, and I'll leave you with your panelists. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you all who are here with us today in this valuable space. I think that we have already had a general presentation of the topic, and I would like to present to each one of the people who are here during this panel. Gustavo Ibarra, president of Araujo Ibarra of Colombia. Welcome. Also, welcome Ms. Sonsoles Garcia, president of the Association of the Free Trade Zone of Ecuador Association, and Martin Dovat, president of Zone America of Uruguay. And also, we will be accompanied by Laura Lopez, CEO of Procomer Costa Rica. I'm just adjusting something here to present everything correctly. I know we have very limited time, so we will get started and directly with the questions that we have in the pipeline. I don't know. I will get started with women. Sonsoles, thank you for being here. I would like us to talk about those main challenges of the special economic trade zones of the region, and if you could give us your perspective to be able to achieve success in this space. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the presentation. I think that in the region we have different visions of what has been the regime itself. Nowadays, we have different countries, such as Uruguay, that the regime has been there for more than 100 years. And in Ecuador, in 2023, we were able to install a new law of free trade zones. That means the challenges for each one of these countries are totally different. I would like to highlight, out of all the challenges that we've seen and that we can analyze, let me specify one that I think is very common for all the regimes in the region. First of all, the legal uncertainty and security. We've seen that in Colombia there has been a challenge in the ideology of the executive regarding the way the regulations of free trade zones is managed, which has caused legal insecurity for investors. On the other hand, we have a new regulation in a country such as Ecuador, where since 2010, where we had a special free trade zone. From the 90s, we moved to a special free trade zones regulation that during the 13 years that it was valid, it didn't have a big impact on the economic engine that we were expecting by these type of regimes. And this is what we can see in different countries. For example, in Peru, we've seen how it works to install a new law of free trade zones. Additionally, there are other challenges that are here. For example, not having good connectivity in infrastructure and logistics. One that is resilient and reliable, that ultimately that makes certain resources such as energy becomes a commodity that not necessarily as at hand of all these special free trade zones. In the case of Ecuador last year, we went through an energy crisis, and this makes this type of regimes have to find a way to use their own resources to leverage themselves and to able to supply the demand of their clients. The CEPAL last year determined that there is an increase in direct foreign investment, but that increase is given because of reinvestment, not because there are new foreign investments. That means retention is very important for the region, and what we have to do is to focus on increasing the production of already existing projects instead of just looking at data in general. Additionally, we have this fiscal competence between countries where we can see and erode the foundation of the income tax to bring investment to countries, and this has been one of the main pillars. However, that doesn't go hand in hand with quality jobs. And last, the acceleration of small and medium companies in the free trade zones. That's another challenge that we see in the region. They're usually the big companies that use these regimes, and they've used it very successfully. But the truth is, in our countries, 80% of the jobs come from those small medium-sized companies. 85% of exports come from these small medium-sized companies. So we need to involve them in this productive chain. Thank you very much. I would like to continue in this order of ideas with Martin. I would like to talk about the experience compared in Latin America, understanding that there are huge challenges around the region. As the previous panelist mentioned, what elements do you find really important so the free trade zones bring investment and also quality jobs? That's what we need in the region. Good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation. Well, Sonsoles did a very good, or made a good introduction, leading from the Zona Franca of Ecuador. I will talk from the private sector. In Zone America, we operate a free trade zone in Uruguay, and this year will be 35 years old. In 2018, we released a free trade zone of services in Colombia, and in turn, we belong to ASFA. That's an association of free trade zones of Iberoamerica. It allows us to have a little bit of a comparison of what is happening in these free trade zones. And as for the success elements, for these type of elements, there are key elements. Let's talk about one that's strategic localization. Each one of the countries, when they propose their free trade zones or special zones, they create a value proposition. And that's very important to see it not as a node, but as a node of a complete supply chain. They could be excellent in the conditions of geolocalization, but if you don't see it in terms of complete supply chain, you are seeing this in an incomplete form. So we need that type of ideas. But there are ruptures or weakness in the supply chain that make us weak in our value proposition. So as success component, it's not only about looking at our special economic zone, what we need to do, the city, the place where we would like to have that plan, but also the international supply chain, the whole structure, even, and the most important thing is, what is the other supply chain that we're competing with? As an example, Uruguay is setting itself as a regional hub. So the cargo arrives to Uruguay, it is organized, and then it is delivered to Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, Argentina. That's awesome. Who are we competing against? We are competing the direct delivery, so the ship takes those things directly to the port in Buenos Aires or Santos, and they have some direct distribution. So we really need to understand how we can transform ourselves as a node of a supply chain, and we sit in the client's shoes, and how can we do it more resistant and more resilient. Another important aspect is the ecosystem. So Soles was saying a few minutes ago, I think you will be talking about it. Costa Rica has a very well undeveloped method of medical devices, and that strengthens things a lot, because when the company says, why should I install? Well, I would be installing when there is a developed system. So the other countries that start a little bit later need to understand what ecosystem they would like to attack and what is their value proposition they have, because after a while the ecosystem evaluation is very heavy. And last, but it's very important also, the infrastructure, the world-class infrastructure. To have this type of infrastructure is a very key aspect that replaces some weaknesses that sometimes we have in our countries in Latin America. there it is important to have access to capital, and the CAF or the other organizations and financial system need help to develop and finance and to be able to pay world-class infrastructure in our free trade zones. So that's a few of the ingredients that I have for the recipe. Thank you. Yeah, we continue with the recipe or the formula that's given success to our panelists. And I would like to continue with Mr. Gustavo. Can you help those 800 special free trade zones in Latin America to promote businesses in the future? When we talk about ecosystems, these company ecosystems, how are they intertwined? Welcome. Yeah, your microphone. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Yolanda, for the questions and the coordination. My kind gratitude to all the members who are here, and I salute Dr. Sami Hakroni, who's the director of the World Free Trade Zone Organization, who's here with us today. Latin America is going through its best time in terms of international trade, thanks to a person that's called Donald Trump, who declared commercial war to China. There has been a reconfiguration of the markets in the region. China was the main partner of the United States. It stopped working, it decreased to 21%, and that's made Latin America to become the greatest the greatest importer of the planet. And that theory that's called nearshoring, that comes from Mexico, and that goes through to each one of the countries in Latin America, finding the free trade zones their best place for landing their products. So the big question is, how can a country discover what they're good for? And first thing, as my namesake, said, we will need to describe what is the value proposition of that country, to see that the country is unique, not only in the business of the present, but of the business of the future. So we are seeing how Latin America still has a 30% of possibilities for growth to get to per capita of exports, Yolanda. Now the world exports $3,000 per inhabitants, and Latin America only 2.2. And these will be hubs that will facilitate that import per capita, and we'll find new movements. And let me summarize this. In countries such as Costa Rica, and they have improved and updated their legislation of free trade zones, including sectors such as tourism, medical tourism, and agricultural industry. We have these type of services in Uruguay. There are data centers, and the service ecosystem was very well developed. In Brazil, the free trade zone has been the center for hydrogen projects. They won a prize for the best free trade zone of the world. In Colombia, the 111 free trade zones that we have showed their resilience, and this is a country that tried to change the model and couldn't. Now they are the landing place of the most important projects of investment of the country. And we have the case of Peru, who in October. They have just approved the special trade zones, and the regulation will be free in the following days of several projects in Peru. So undoubtedly that will change everything. And the president of the Chamber of Commerce in Lima, who's just arrived, he was a member of the free trade zones in Peru, and we kindly say hello to him. We have Jamaica, where the free trade zones will reactivate the recovery of the country after the terrible hurricane that destroyed a big part of this country, and that undoubtedly has huge projects that will transform the island in one of the best sectors of investment of the Caribbean. And I cannot finish without saying without inviting you all to the World Congress of Free Trade Zones that will be held in this same place from the 12th to the 15th of May this year. And the greatest free trade zones of the world will be coming here to present their experiences and of how a free trade zone today, the 5,000 zones of the planet, are laboratories for the future business in the present time. Thank you very much for giving us this regional class. And talking about that laboratory, Claudia, I would like you to help us understand how these special clusters and productive zones somehow can make sure guarantee knowledge transference and also linking and transfer of technology and help productive diversification of the region. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, effectively, as the panelists were mentioning previously, in Costa Rica has centered its efforts in generating clusters and using these free trade zones as one of the instruments to make clusters. So I wouldn't say that the free trade zone is the result of the cluster. I would say that the cluster is one of the results of the clusters is the free trade zone. Why? Because the free trade zone, when it was the law in Costa Rica was created 35 years ago, they had several attributes that were mentioned previously, like the fundamental things. First thing is that frank zones in Costa Rica were established for what we call sectores estratégicos, strategic sectors. And what does it mean? That as a country we had to make an agreement of what were those big sectors that we wanted to promote. So the free trade zone became a public policy. One more that we would implement to develop these sectors. And here we are talking about an effort made by the country per manufacturing sectors of high complexity that took us to a medical cluster. And now it means more than 48% of our own experts. That means a sector that moves the economy, that generates more than 60,000 jobs. But that is also highly connected to the local industry and the other big movement and big agreement that we carried out, especially when we updated our law of free trade zones in the 2000s, was to incorporate the service sector of high knowledge services. And in Costa Rica, we have that hub of services in Latin America. And with this, I want to say that the first great action that we took was to understand that we had to make a decision of the public policies that we were going to do to make clusters, and including free trade zones as one of those tools. But that's just not enough. So how can we make chains with the rest of the economy? Well, we would start to shape providers and start dynamizing regions around these projects. And initially, Costa Rica had to bring and attract the big companies of medical devices, and they are big providers, for example, Cuartos Limpios. One technology or service that was not perfect to do from the local industry, but little by little, the effect that these types of clusters generate, it facilitated that some plastic and other types of testing projects came to strengthen the cluster. And now the cluster has become a fundamental part of our proposal, our value proposition, our main ambassadors that we do have our own experience. So I do believe that took us to these chainings that are now joke. In fact, 57% of the total purchase that were made by companies of the free trade zones are made in local companies. It's a huge number that's been growing, And also throughout the years, it's grown. And to put it into relative terms so you can understand the weight of this amount, it's more heavy than what comes to in Costa Rica as per remittances. It's 6,000 million US dollars are the local purchases made by the free trade zones. We are connected. I think another point that's been fundamental as it is how to understand and prioritize undoubtedly the legal security, and that was pointed out from the beginning. The certainty that the rules of the game will not change is what allows the cluster to be dynamized. It is what allows long-term investment. It is what allows for country vision, and I think that's been the key to success of what Costa Rica has achieved in the free trade zones. Right. You were talking about the legal securities and so on, and the challenges in general terms that could face these special trade zones. I would like you, from the perspective from the Uruguayan situation, Martin, could you tell us what are those challenges to share with us to see if there are some meeting points and new perspectives that we need to be aware of, right? I think that the legal security in the global context where we are located is becoming a very, very important attribute in the value proposition. We're in a world that's ever changing, that's very highly polarized. The pendulum moves very quickly for one side and to the other side. That's bad in every sense of the word. In the case of Uruguay, the regime of free trade zones that was mentioned by Zonsol is 1 year old, but we needed to highlight, to renovate it. It is a structure that has been kept very stable, even despite of the left and right governments change, and that is a very serious platform because the investor, the company, and the Uruguayan company is relaxed that they will not have those games of the game of the rules of the game changed, and their perspectives will be believable and modifications will not be necessary. And taking into account this foundation that would be local security in world-class security, clear understanding of clusters, a good value proposition. So I am adding myself to Martin's comment. Well, yes, but the world is not only does it change the political outlook, it changes also from the technological point of view. So what are the business of tomorrow? Are we prepared beyond having this platform for business of tomorrow? And then the key is innovation. We have the systems of innovation on site and our special free trade zones. And Sonsolo was telling you a little bit about this, that in these free trade zones are commonly used for big companies. But well, so it is key for resilience. What's happening? Where are the entrepreneurs? Where are the startups? Are we including our ecosystem? So my proposal is to incorporate true things. Are you on that platform? Well, let me give you a concrete example, which is the incorporation of a new industry in Uruguay, which is the aerospace industry that's based on the nano satellites, low orbit satellites that go very fast around the atmosphere. To give you a concrete example, is the telecommunications company of the Tesla group, Elon Musk, and there are others, right? Well, in our business park, we have had these type of businesses, and they are startups, and they start to ask, okay, it looks good to me. The logistics look good to me to assemble nano satellites. It works well. I can have the added value, but after that, we had to develop a special agency that's connected to that thing, and now we have 25 satellites that are in orbit that have the Uruguayan register. We passed from 0 to 25 satellites. Well, but then what my colleague was saying of Costa Rica. We need to have a whole supply chain. We need to have parts. We need to have talent that somehow knows that we are aware, and we need to have venture capital as well. We need to have them, and we talk with the CAF if the CAF would participate in debt or in equity or in almost equity input. Whether it's with CAF or another investment, the capital should be there. And what's most important, we need to help entrepreneurs. We need to help them, and they need to be there. They need to be ready and say, okay, an entrepreneur can change where they want to travel in the world, while where they can create their own startup. Well, we're a fertile territory with our business markets, with our free trade zones. So those entrepreneurs say, I can go there. And in the case of Uruguay, recently we had an incredible improvement in terms of conditions that in Uruguay, I mean, other offices help other companies, and it helps them because at some point some people said if a company has a difficult tax, then they will not have help. If a startup loses for the next following years to just get started with the money, so it is very important that the innovation agency of our country also gives, etc. So I would like to give you this takeaway: innovation is key, and the future businesses are part of our free trade zones.
Regarding the future, I'm going to ask the same question to Sonsoles and to my colleague. They will answer them separately. Everything that you can see from your stance, which are the future plans, what should be implemented, and what about the narrative at the theory level that can be adapted to into the praxis? From the Association of Free Zones of the Ecuador that was created a couple years ago, as I was explaining, in December 2023, we have a new act for the special economic zones and the free zones that provided specifically a more clear an attractive framework, legal framework, and thanks to that, we created the association. The challenge right now is in a few years to share the experiences that my colleagues are sharing, the figures, the amount of companies that can be positioned, the million of dollars in exports, innovation, added value, the technology transfer. I would love in a few years to share the Ecuadorian experience of that. However, we have a harder challenge at this point because after you have this position regime in Colombia, Costa Rica, Ecuador, and Uruguay, Ecuador is late with a very avant-garde strategy. But at the end of the day, we have many exogenous factors that makes for the regime to, not to have the synergy and the inertia that it needs to move. It's not just the public policy, it is the trust coming from the private sector, the physical lack of safety that we have in the country. There are an important amount of factors that should be collected so these can be an attractive regime. So that's why from the association we are having many organizations. We want to have a connection with the ASFA, with the Globe Organization for Special Economic Zones as well. We want to have open communications, channels of communications with the government, the Ministry of Labor, Customs Ministry as well, so we can also understand the qualified labor that is needed by the private sector, so they can be located in free duties, and it's not in place at this moment. So what can we do? We need to get in touch with the different education institutions for them to be in these areas, so we can have the training, so they can understand that this association is a strategic partner for the companies. Could be operators, uses good services they want to eradicate or can install, can be in Ecuador. At the end of the day, one of the most important goals is to create this observatory of special economic zones. With, in partnership with the universities, we can gather real data of the situation in Ecuador. Data regarding investment, companies, employment, and exports. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to give the floor to Laura. I think that there is a critical aspect that we all have mentioned, but it is worth to go deep into. I'm talking about talent generation. Once the talent was scarce, resource. We have the situation, for example, the study of manpower in the region was indicating that 7 out of 10 companies saying that they cannot find the talent that they needed. For the Costa Rican case, we have understood that our value, our differentiator factor, it is not the price, it's not the volume, but the quality. Then we need to keep working on sectors of very high value and highly specialized, and that requires highly specialized talent. So we have been investing on talent, and we have found that that is an incentive, an added incentive besides the tax incentives that we have as part of the value proposals of our duty-free zones. We have found interesting mechanisms. We have centers inside of these zones, an adjustment to the act, so we can have these centers of innovation or hot bees in bets under the area as well, and also incentives where the promoters, which is the administration, the manager of this area, which is Procomer in this case, so can co-found process of upskilling and reskilling with the companies inside of these zones. So we fund up to the 50% of the cost for those projects, and if the company can train people that can actually potentially be their employees and they are at the end of the day hired, then we can fund 90% of the cost. There's an added incentive to train the talent, but also from the vision of the pure demand. Absolutely demand driven. So this has been a way to for us to specialize ourselves, because that's the way we can put together a system, an ecosystem of medical devices and these growth strategies. And now we are moving towards the next step. The next one is to be a specialist in cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, to work in different type of manufacturing, the highly each time more specialized. And the key for that is talent. Let me re-ask you about the demand in which specific areas we mentioned. You mentioned two, but I would like you to go deeper into the real demand, understanding that this is a dialogue that many students are actually observing, and this will be at the end of the day a global conversation that will be in YouTube and the channels that we have established to share information of these forums information. In Costa Rica, we have seen, and also with the companies that we have worked on, for all the professionals and technicians. I want to highlight these technicians because the industry is looking technicians with important skills to rethink themselves. So the capacity of just accumulating certifications over the other that is more valuable than general profession that you study through 4 years. So for example, engineers and semiconductors, for example, and mechatronic technicians. For example, so everything related with electronics, mechanics, data analytics, artificial intelligence, all of that at the end of the day from Procomeda and Costa Rica, we're fully persuaded that in few years we will have a mega sector for electronics. Because at the end of the day, all the medical component of them and so on and so forth will be part of it. It is not a coincidence that we have semiconductors, one of the areas that is moving a lot of talent. I believe that all the sectors associated with that architecture to that area, that part of in the industrial processes connected with the electronic area, that is the future. Mr. Ibarra, if there is line of a thread of thought that we can see through these days. For example, we can see as a bloc and act as a bloc as well. For example, to be more competitive as a bloc as well. From the standpoint of the special economic zones, how can we, or what can we do to achieve the regional unification so we can be more competitive? Thank you so much, Yolanda. I want to congratulate the CAF for the leadership on uniting America, so America can actually find a true future in this convoluted world. We need to grow 600,000 of million to achieve the per capita income needed of 3 million per inhabitant. So the special economic zones will occupy 50% of that growth, and also the economic zones in Latin America are growing. They are doubling in numbers. I can certify that before a sworn notary, if you want. 2 or 3 ideas, insights here. Yolanda, if you ask me for a single word, how can I summarize this panel? I will say the mix of security and innovation were played. Once we combine these areas, we can actually succeed. China never changed the rules of the game through the time of the initial incentives. 30 years doing in these type of zones. The new act of special private zones in Peru ensures that they can change the act, but they won't do it in the 25 years. But then, if the regime is changing, all the benefits will be respected for those 25 years. And for the new businesses of the future, the artificial intelligence, these free duty zones are the future for the data centers. These can be storage in these free duty zones in the area. Hydrogen, for example, with all the implications. So you can see how the rockets that are sent to the space, they are allocated in the duty-free zone areas in countries, because it makes no sense to have them paying taxes in their own countries. So that's what they do it in areas where they cannot actually pay. They won't pay taxes. So I want to summarize this saying that the most important element of this type of zones and the special economic zones is the political support. The max political leader of the region. It could be a sheikh, it could be a president, whatever you want to call it, a king. So this should be supported by this person. The question here is, how can we make the Peru to have one of the best regulations on Latin America? You can see how this is happening in Ecuador and the other Latin American countries, because this is a dynamic region. So you need to keep attention to things that are happening in the world and what your neighbors doing, so you can go beyond the value proposal. That's correct. We have reached the end of this panel. I generally thank this high-level panel because we are reflecting the diversity and experience and approaches in the region, from Central America also the South Cone. So thank you very much for being with us in these conversations. So let's see each other next time for these, the one that will be in May from the 12th to the 15th in this place. We will see you again here in Panama by then. I want to thank you all for your participation. In brief, we will start with this last panel of the second day of this International Latin American Forum.
intersection of government policy and the free market to offer a better understanding of the free enterprise system and its impact on human prosperity around the world. Founded in 2020 by Governor Ron DeSantis and the Florida legislature to promote education and mentorship through multidisciplinary programs and fellowships, we empower students in public policy and free enterprise. We conduct cutting-edge research in political and economic systems, host global conferences and seminars, and improve public policy by providing informed analysis to decision makers. At the Adam Smith Center, we blend knowledge and action to shape a prosperous new future and foster a vibrant community of leaders. We inform, innovate, influence, inspire. The Adam Smith Center for Economic Freedom at FIU. The Adam Smith Center for Economic Freedom at Florida International University. Exploring the intersection of government policy and the free market to offer a better understanding of the free enterprise system and its impact on human prosperity around the world. Founded in 2020 by Governor Ron DeSantis and the Florida legislature to promote education and mentorship through multidisciplinary programs and fellowships, we empower students in public policy and free enterprise. We conduct cutting-edge research on political and economic systems, host global conferences and seminars, and improve public policy by providing informed analysis to decision makers. At the Adam Smith Center, we blend knowledge and action to shape a prosperous, free future.
Quisiera invitarlos a tomar asiento para
I would like
continuar
to
con el
invite
último
you
panel
to
de hoy.
have a seat so we can continue with the last panel for this afternoon.
Just learn, you achieve. In our interdisciplinary Bachelor of Science in Business and Government Leadership, you'll gain perspective, innovate, and connect with real-world leaders.
It starts with me.
It starts with me.
It starts with me. It starts with you.
Leadership starts here.
Ahora es el momento de recibir
This
el
is
último
the
panel
moment
de nuestra
to
sala
start the
LAC
last panel of our LAC Inspire conference room. Let's welcome Nicolás Estupiñans, the Director of Logistics and Transport for the CAF. He will introduce the panel, which is Railway Infrastructure as a Driver of Connectivity and Economic Growth in Latin America and the Caribbean. Let's give him a big warm applause, please. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes? It's a bit weird, right? Talking, you cannot hear yourself. But yeah, good afternoon, all. This is the last session that we have in terms of infrastructure. We have this wonderful session that is titled Railway Infrastructure as a Driver of Connectivity and Economic Growth. In Latin America, railways are getting a very interesting, a very important push. In the region, we have had railroads in our books, our zones, in our blood, and now we can see how in Latam and the Caribbean a regrowth again of the spirit of the railways. We have done in the captains of studies and analysis that is showing that we have some projects with a potential of 300,000 million of USD to develop projects that can be inclusive, green, resilient, but mainly so they can help us to connect the territory to generate higher productivity, higher equality, and mainly so we can favor the marginalized populations. This panel will cover different topics. We have a high-level luxury panel, people with a lot of capacities and experience that have worked in these topics throughout the different type of projects and initiatives that we have seen in the last 2 days here in Panama. We're going to touch upon how we can find added resources so we can improve and mature these projects, so we can ensure that the projects are enough ready, prepared, so they can comply with all their goals, so they can comply as well with the development, with the integration, with the inclusion, and with the proposal being much more efficient, so we can improve the competitive and the productivity in the countries, and also the resiliency. Then, how can we create a greener technology so we can also tackle the new challenges that we have due to the climate change? Without further ado, then I'm going to give the floor to our moderator, María Consuelo Araujo. She's going to help us moderating the last session. Thank you very much. All right. Can you hear me? Great. Thank you. My name is María Consuelo Araujo. I am the president of the Colombia Chamber of Infrastructure of Colombia, appointed in December. I will start working now formally after this panel in February. And I would like to thank, of course, CAF for the invitation. I want to reiterate, as Nicolas said, this is a luxury panel that would allow us to have decision makers that are at this point leading, working on a railways projects, one for passenger transport, so for freight transport as well, but also we have representatives of the international banking area and institutions that know about the development of railways in the world. So I want to sit down around here, and then I want to invite our panelists so they can join us. First of all, I want to welcome, please, Eric Martin, President of State Railways of Chile. Welcome. Thank you so much for your attendance. Irene Flores, the General Manager of Ferrovías de Guatemala. Over here, please. Manager of the Ferrovías de Guatemala. Railways of Guatemala. Henry Farup, National Secretary of the Panama Railroad. Our host in this beautiful Panama. Thank you very much, Henry. The Mayor of Bogotá's representative of Colombia, Carlos Fernando Galán. He has also many perks on trains. Thank you, Mayor. Ju Hyun. She is coming from the UIC. She's going to share about the experiences, the international standards, and how to learn from different railroad ways and projects in the planet. And Joana Sarmento, she's coming from the multilateral banking of Europe, and she's going to help us to make all of those dreams a reality. So since we are many, I would like for all the projects of the countries, the decision makers, to tell us quickly the entity that you represent and the main challenge that we have in your railroads projects. So I would like to start, please, with Eric over here. Bien. All right, can you hear me? Great. All right, I want to thank CAF that you invited us. I am Eric Martin. I am the president of the State Railways of Chile. This is a company with 142 years. It's not my age. I am just slightly younger, but we're so happy of being here to tell you that we have a big challenge. A few months ago, we inaugurated bridge that has 2 kilometers of full extension, and this was a 3 years long project. We learned, I want to tell you that we did it because of the previous government, a different sign even, made all the studies that were needed and created and started with did all the tendering process, and were the ones that we started. The most important thing here, the message here is we need to ensure continuity for all the projects, and the railroad projects, they need to ensure the long-term continuity so the banks can actually help us. And it is also very important to maintain the line of production. If you tell me that is one of the most relevant topics that need to work on. And last year I was here, and CAF, they lent us $500,000 so we invested that part of that in the bridge. We want to publicly thank. We have signed another loan for 700,000 million USD to create another one in the southeast part of Santiago. And I will keep telling you this later on. Irene, please, can you please tell us about the main challenge that you have in your organization? Yes, good morning. Can you hear me? Apologies, good afternoon. I am Irene Flores. First of all, I want to thank CAF for the invitation. At this point, I am working for Ferrovías de Guatemala, which is the ones that uses the resources for all the roads of Guatemala. So we are calling this project the reactivation of the railways. In Guatemala, we are going back to the activation of the operation for freight and also passengers. We do not have modern assets. We have a network that was thought and built 100 years ago. So we have a lot of challenges in terms of at the technical level, legally speaking as well. But I want to highlight two, since you are asking about the main challenges of a country that wants to work with this type of projects. The first one is governance, the roles and the institutions, governmental institutions that we have created in the last 50 years in Guatemala that are not connected with the railways projects that we have at this point. So we have a lot of actors with roles that are interwired, but we need to organize. At the same time, we have the municipality autonomy, we have the company that owns these companies, we have a concession one, we have one that funds the manager. That is a very important problem. The other one is the judicial certainty of the right to use of the roads. That is a property of the state, but after 100 years, and half of that time was without use of these network, then we have problems with the ownership of that land. That's another challenge that we have as countries, and for that we need a much more powerful legal framework. And I will say the third one, I will focus the main problems in a single one, which is a culture of mega constructions, right? You need to go for the preparation planning phases that are very robust so that you can reduce the mistakes, so you can also reduce, mitigate risk in terms of expenditures, costs, and delays. And we need to see them as integrated systems, not isolated projects of railways connections, but these are cargo projects that are connected with passengers and logistics as well, so they can be fully integrated to the public transportation system. Excellent. That perspective of the strategic infrastructure that can be integrated and also integrates is the same that is shared here in Panama. Is that correct, Mr. Henry? Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Panama, the country. Our country, Panama, has a long story of railways. The first one that was the interoceanic that was created in Latin America is coming from 1850 due to the geographical position of Panama. And then we have the construction of the channel, and the railroad then was activated again, and it's still activated, and we're focused then in the channel, right? However, we started with my activities now. It was the initiative of the president that in their campaign, his project, he proposed to make a new railway that will connect the Panama City up to the border with Costa Rica. So I was the person in charge of starting up this whole process from the 3rd of July of 2024, and then we started with all the studies, and we have advanced a lot. We have considered many factors. Um, the vision that I had, the vision that have that I had at that moment is changed completely. Uh, Everything is just focused in the channel and also the city, right? 5 or 7% of the country, 80% of the economic activity is located in that 5%, and also 60% of the population is located there. So we think that through the railways and the stations, that will help with the integration of the country, and it will create a better development as well. So this will be a railway corridor, not just a train. We will create businesses through the railway. The railroad is going to be one for freight and for passengers. So combines both. Yes, it will combine both, and the important thing is a social service and economic service, and freight. We will take advantage due to the geographical situation of the country, of the connection with the channel. At this point, we have 5 ports, and we are thinking of making 2 more. And throughout the country, we have another one that is a project right now. Um, the advantage of this railway is, of course, that will start in Panama. We hope that will be the spear of the connection of the whole Central America. Okay, I'm now going to ask the mayor, Carlos Fernando Galan. Can you please share with us what are you here on this panel? What about the perks of trains that we have? You read my mind, Mara Consuelo, because I would like to just start saying why I am here. I am the mayor of a city that during the 75 years were debating about the metro, whether to do or not a metro. Finally, 9 years ago already, was defined to do the first line. And I am copy a little bit what Erika was saying a few minutes ago, is the continuity is critical, and that frustrated a lot of projects in Bogota, is the lack of capacity from different mayors to continue with what was coming from before. This is a process of structure, funding, building a project, right? And that lasts more than project. In Colombia, a project lasts more than up to 4 years without a local re-election. Locally speaking, we had 3 governments. We working on this. We received that a few years ago with a 28%, and at this point we have a 71 advancing with a good rhythm. We have the trains in Bogota. Which one has been the secret to finally do it after 80 years? Well, the continuity through those 3 mayors, that was critical. During my government, we defined that as the priority number one. The city is in a transformation as never before. We have 2 lines of Transmilenio under construction, 2 cable transportation under construction, 2 big infrastructure constructions at the same time. But the priority is the metro, because the other infrastructure says, I want to receive the same priority as the metro. What that's entitled? It includes permits that we call the PMT, the Transportation Management Plans, also with the priority of the metro to build, to construct these in a corridor such as the Caracas Avenue in Bogota that has a BRT moving 35,000 passengers per hour at the same time. So when this is built, we have buses transporting 35,000 passengers at the same time, and we can achieve that with difficulties, but the city is still operating. So the key has been coordination, continuity, and defense. Continuity, and let me conclude by saying this: it was at risk with the national government that wanted to change the project. Once the project started, the project was under construction, and the national government said we need to change it. And that meant at that point 5 more years of paralysis. And the project was saying no, we defended the project, and thanks to that, right now the project is up to 70% of advance. Thank you, Mr. Fernando. Now I'm going to ask to you of the USC. So can you please share with us about your entity and the accumulated knowledge about railways?
I work with the International Union of Railways. I am from Brazil, so I could speak Portuguese, but I'll explain in English because I think it's a bit easier. UIC is a association of international association of railway companies, operators, infrastructure managers, as well as other companies that are working in that space. And we bring together all our members to work in technical solutions. Both technical standards to make interoperability easier, but also solutions in the different areas of engineering of railways, like asset management, like telecommunications, signaling, et cetera, so that the lives of the companies that actually operate railways is made a little bit easier through all this technical knowledge that exists out there, as well as by learning from one another and the challenges that they face. And I just wanted to, and myself, I work with the advocacy team. So the most important part of my job is continuing to promote railways, because I think if you're sitting here is because you already maybe believe that railways are something worth investing in. But in many spaces, that's not the case. I think there is a lot of people and a lot of organizations that believe that maybe this is not the case. There are other projects that are worthwhile the money that it costs, because let's face it, railways cost a lot of money. But yeah, so my job is to go out there and promote the continuing of investments of railways as a way to develop the economies, to connect places. I was here since yesterday, and we heard a lot about the importance of regional integration in Latin America, of continuing to promote international cooperation in this region. And I think we cannot talk about real integration without talking about the integration of transport as well, right? We have this huge market in Latin America, but getting a product from point A to point B across our different countries is a challenge that is yet to be conquered. So that's more or less what we do and what we're here to do today.
Gracias, Ju. Bueno, ahora nos vamos con Joana.
Johanna, so for all of these products, so they are a reality, we need funding. Joanna, can you please share with us what you do in the organization? Hello, everyone. I am Joana Sarmento. I work in the European Investment Bank. This is a multilateral bank with the 27 member states of the European Union. I want to thank CAF. I want to thank everyone for the invitation. It is a pleasure for us being here in this panel. So, we are a multilateral bank. We work in more than 127 countries in the world. What did we do? We lent more than 100,000 million of euros. In Latin America, we had the opportunity to lend a record figure, more than 1,500 million euros. One of those examples is the trans of Metro in Bogota, the line number 1. So our bank can support projects for the loans to the private and the public sector with good opportunities at the long terms, promoting, supporting the bankability of their projects. Great, so we can start now in Panama. How can Panama take advantage the position, the strategic position, privileged position that you have in the world, and also the canal and these railroads projects? The intention of this project is first to have a social impact, right? We want to take all this group of people that are around the canal, around the capital, to move them, or so they can be redistributed through all the whole country. We want to create a network of the canal, the ports, industry, businesses. For example, we have an airport that is 2 hours from here by land in a car. But we have this airport that is not under use, is not used because through the canal in the stations we reserve land that will be used by the railroad so they can be used in the future projects. So we can bring over their companies that can do maintenance for airplanes, so we can have also freight services, export or imports, and also the expansion towards Central America and Costa Rica. We have had conversations with them, and we have a union point with Costa Rica in the border. Then we want to improve customs there as well, and all the services can be integrated from the freight area, but also in the social area. I was told that the mistakes for the physical and railroad mistakes created in Central America and in South America you don't want to repeat those mistakes, and the Panamanian project will be the first link of this connection in Central America. Exactly. Panama will be the spear point of the whole integration of Central America. We do have this tema that is called Panama, that is used in this part of the world, in the continent, and we are complying with all these specifications of this organization, and this is a way to promote integration, so we know exactly the same technical specifications. That's also something that we want to achieve. Eric, in Chile, the institution that you are leading represents an important legacy, but now we are working in the approach trends. That's the important part at this point. So what about the challenges on that? Yeah, as a matter of fact, we have a project around 1,200 million USD that is incorporated with signaling, energy, and road. This is a train of 62,000 kilometers that connects the capital city with nearby areas. It has a very interesting characteristics because we have a part of 63 kilometers that are located in a certain place, but we have another one, a train should go across each 6 minutes. That demands technology so the trains can talk to each other. This is a security affair. We have some civil construction activity projects that are connected for different typologies, in this case for the vehicles, because in this way we are not creating disruption of the connectivity between and the realities. It is also important for us to know the fact that yes, you have, of course, going through the urban areas. This safety then is also a challenge. Yes, of course, and we also need to segregate precisely because of the speed of the trains. You cannot allow to create some collisions, and that's why you need to create different type of levels. The meaning of that is that once you reach a station, you need to make sure about the proximity rates, because based on that you need to distribute people as well. In a different area of Santiago, we have very good relationships with the metro in Santiago, and in that connection then we can use the capillarity of that meter so we can redistribute. It's a critical topic for us because thanks to that we can optimize the railway and also the capillarity provided by the metro so we can distribute the people in Santiago. This project is going to be ready, we hope, by the end of the new government. I will say around early 2025, first quarter. And the other thing is that we hope that in the continuity of this transportation mode in Santiago, it is also with that, then once we have a full production by 2030, 2031, 55 million of trips yearly. The consequences of this will be once you leave your vehicle, you can use another different transportation mean, so you can contribute to a lack of traffic congestion and
Ahora
also
vamos a hablar con
the
Yu
reduction
más
of
adelante sobre los
emissions.
beneficios ambientales de estos proyectos ferroviarios, pero
Now we will talking about the benefits of these railroad projects. Now, I would like to give the floor to Carlos Fernando so he can tell us what does he have in mind to integrate the metro with the Transmilenio system that moves 4 million trips a day. So how are you going to assemble that on the go? Well, Bogota has a good experience in terms of integration of systems, the system that we have now, that Transmilenio has, and as you said, this main system moves around 2 million passengers, and the zonal moves a little bit more. So it's a system of buses in Bogota that moves 4 million trips a day today in the city. That's totally integrated. The citizen with a single car can have access to from one way to another using different means without paying extra. There's got 125 minutes to move around from one system to another system without paying for it again. Right now we're working with Transmilenio, the Secretary of Mobility, in the metro with an integrated system that includes the metro as well, and that will allow to add the metro in the system might not be the same. It will be a more modern one. It would have another other system for payment, but that would allow the citizen to ride on the metro, and with the same payment he will be able to take a Transmilenio or using the cable cars. Yes, the feeding is that's what we're going to. That this is one of the few citizens in Latin America that made progress in that total integration in systems of transportation. There is no another city with the same characteristics, but that should include the metro, and that's what we're doing. The metro is a concession. There's a different structure, but the system will be spreading the resources as it corresponds. And what about the physical integration? How have you thought of the metro and Transmilenio? Well, the Transmilenio, the metro will be moving 1,050,000 passengers a day. That's going to be one of the most loaded lines in the world, I believe, because it means 72,000 passengers hour direction. And the design of the metro, the lines, the plans, it took into account today's lines and the future lines of Transmilenio. So it's got a permanent integration in the different stations with that same means of transportation. In the main road of Caracas, there will be one like Metro and Transmilenio at the same time, and it will be integrated to the regional trains. So the central train system would be a hub for other regional train that will be converging. That's the way this is thought of, and we're implementing a policy that's called the Renewable Projects for Sustainable Mobility. These projects aim or seek to have in the stations of the metro to have a good process with the private and public sector of urban development, to find better ways to integrate spaces, to have more public spaces. So you will be able to build here, but you need to go there. You need to open and generate all public spaces and connect with all the cycle lanes. For example, in Bogota, we have more than 600,000 kilometers of lanes. So it is to take advantage of what you already have to improve the quality of public space, right? Yes, to understand a public work that can take us to move more beyond the simple system that moves people around, but how it can better integrate, how it has a better urban design that improves the city and improves the public space for the citizen, for the cyclist, and the connections with the rest. I think Bogota had a very interesting story of building public systems without understanding how it could be better integrated. So we have systems places where there is a place that is not so well integrated, and the system needs to understand that. We understand we need to change that and integrate the system to the city. And that's what we're working on with these new projects of urban renewal for sustainability. Thank you, Carlos Fernando. Irene, with all these experiences in Chile, in Panama, as you move along with the project in Colombia, in Bogota, the challenge that you mentioned for the institutional fragmentation. How are you addressing it? How can you renew a railway infrastructure for lines that are 8 years old, but during the last years they became unused? What is the road that you have for yourself? I want to thank the CAF because for this forum and this invitation here in Panama, and the institutions that have welcomed me. I've learned a lot. We have learned a lot. And effectively, we rescue an asset which is the right to life, which was thought of as it means to rescue institutions. And part of what we're doing is to promote a new legal framework to define governance, clear roles, each one with their responsibilities. And there are political agreements on that. Yes, we're working on the proposals that will require political agreements, and we're on the phases of development of that legal framework, accompanied always by international experts here. The multilateral banking sector is giving all their technical expertise that are availability in terms of governance and legal framework to Guatemala to take advantage of that expertise and to develop that governance structure that will take us to the railway infrastructure that should be modern. That's what we want to build. And another important topic here is that the certainty, as I said before, of the ownership of the land, and that we can have the capability to manage socially what it means to recover that right for life. It is 800 kilometers that Guatemala has. Then a great part has social and invasion problems, and that requires a legal framework that is updated and that is agile, that allows for that social management of recovery. It's very important, hand in hand with these two cannot coexist if you don't have a portfolio of believable projects. That is to say, that we can propose railway connections of load connected to generation centers, such as sports, because it is not a railway project for load, for heavy load. It's not just for that. It is a whole model of transportation that's integrated. So there needs to be a portfolio of believable projects, and that's what we're doing, and we're working in two fronts. The railway projects are connected to the main ports, principally with the Guatemala port. That's the greatest generator in terms of volume, and connected to the borders. And we were always talking about regional integration. We have the particularity as a mere coincidence that our neighbor is Mexico, and they're perfectly integrated. The railroad is connected with the rest of North America, and that integration, that's a country that we need to connect to be connected to that continent. On that front, we also have the railway infrastructure to transport people, and they're proposed in a believable way in the demand roads where people can need it. How can you what's their transportation like today? Well, they have transportation systems, a VRT, that's important in Guatemala City and in other municipalities of the metropolitan area. But I would say that it's just very little for the flow of people that the Guatemala City has as population and the metropolitan area, and people will solve their problem. We live very serious problems of traffic in Guatemala, and people have sorted those problems, and that has implied to find other more agile ways of transportation, such as motorcycles. We're getting to a tipping point in terms of number of motorcycles, which is it's difficult to give a whole cost-effective solution to them and integrating. That's why these mobility projects need to be thought as systems, not only an intervention, not only one railway. And in that regard, June, you can tell us why is it worth to get off the motorbike. What are the advantages, environmental advantages, social advantages of these type of railway projects? And I agree with you that here we cannot sell the projects. Here we need to make visible those advantages, and that's useful for us to be able to move forward and to get the resources and to convince institutions.
I think, as most of the panelists here have highlighted, I think the important thing is the railway system is not going to exist on its own, right? It has to exist in tandem to other transport systems that can collectively deliver both the goods and the people to where they need to be and increase the general well-being of the people. And railways have a very enlarged capacity to deliver positive externalities through their services. I think if you think about job creation, you see construction and operating and maintaining all these railways. In itself, they create a lot of jobs, but they also create opportunities along the supply chain that is needed to maintain the system operating. It also creates economic access to the people that are going to be on each end that now can go further to seek economic opportunities. And that is especially important for women, for instance, who oftentimes will, if the household will only have one car, then the man will take the car to work, but then the women are left to use the public transport system. So that is definitely something very important for gender equality issues as well. I think if you think about the environmental impact, that's where railways have an enormous advantage. Globally, railways are responsible for the transportation of 7% of people, 6% of goods, at only 1% of the emissions. So it's a significant reduction of emissions that we see once, instead of putting cargo into a truck, onto a railways. Obviously, it's not the case for every single journey, but for long distance journeys, that's absolutely the case. And so I looked up. I just wanted to give one example, and it's not from the region, but I think it's really important to put it into perspective. The IEA, the International Energy Agency, has done a study looking into what would have happened if China hadn't built their railway system, and they assessed that the expansion of the railway system avoided 1.5 million barrels of oil every single day in 2024. That's more than all the economy that was generated by electric vehicles in the entire world. So this is something to reflect. Sometimes people will say, oh, railways, they are so expensive to build, they're so expensive to operate, but think about all the positive externalities that it's putting against and all the savings that the society is seeing in terms of congestion, air pollution, access. And if you put that in the math, then I don't think that they are that expensive at all. But
En todo caso, si son muy costosos,
all in all, if they're too expensive, well, you need to see the externalities, and this is why we have the banking, right? We have the lenders. And here, the CAF has had a high sensitivity with this type of railway infrastructure. So why don't you tell us, Joanna, out of those financial instruments that even start to be taken into account by the environmental agencies, I think this is very useful for all the projects that are going on right now. Thank you very much. Well, as a representative of banks, I don't know if we all have innovative solutions, but we have other types of solutions. Every time a multilateral bank, all different, and CAF, we have a project, we have a complete due diligence, and we take into account not only the engineering technical perspective, but also the social, gender, and environmental aspects to it. Another topics, when we say, what can a bank bring? Yeah, of course, the banks that could be to the citizen, to the private sector, or through different projects with different good conditions, maybe it's not innovative, but the quality, the rate, the term is what allows projects to be able to go to the bank financially and economically. And besides this financial point, there are other two key points. The first one is that the multilateral bank can bring technical assistance. It can move different points, in our case of the European Commission, with the member states to support with the different studies and with the implementation to guarantee these projects are come from the contract. It's not just one signature and in 5 years they disappear. The other point is that the banks, we banks have a complete team. I'm a financial team. I'm not an engineer, but it's true that every time that we come to a project, for example, the metro in Bogota, we come with an engineer, we come with the economist, we can come with the social expert, with the environmental expert, with the gender expert, and if it's necessary, we bring more people, and we articulate with the other people of the bank. And this type of support is something that the commercial banks not being able to do, because that's not their role. And many times the banks, multilateral banks, will not take the first risk of infrastructure projects with high amounts, with some complexity. And we see high opportunities for us to develop the countries with these type of projects. So I think that I don't know if these are innovative, but I think they are necessary. Well, in the 7 minutes that we have left, I would like to ask all of you to answer the same question with your own experience, and which is, I think the conversation is not about if there are we need to create railway infrastructure. We agree, yes, it has a lot of advantages, but how? As for your experience, how can we make this topic not only about sustainability, not only about strategy, not only about competitiveness, but also about integration in Latin America? What, in a single phrase, we're not. Well, the first thing, and would like to repeat it, is the sense of state projects. When you present yourself to the project as a status project, maybe you finish the engineering, but you need to give the best engineering to the next one, and the next one will do the best bid. They will know the risks, and we will invite the best companies. When that is being taking place in the organization and with the different leaders, political and technical leaders, you're able to project these huge works of engineering and construction with a plausible future. And of course, where what matters is the people who this will be serving to. Infrastructure is just a means, and we need to do it very well, but this is for the people. Thank you, Danny. I would add the reality that these projects need to mean a reduction in terms of logistic cost, savings in times, to be believable, and to be able to put to the banks. And it's difficult to do it in a single country in our region. It's a good challenge to do it in an integrated way in the region, because that implies not only integrated engineering, as I mentioned, not only the technical point of view, but also the rules. Very important, the customs and the borders. So that is a major challenge, and the operational model. So it really represents a saving in terms of costs, and it can have a future. June, what are we not doing that we need to do so there are more projects?
I think we should think about, and I can speak a little bit about based on the work that we do at UIC, is really looking into how railways can be somehow compensated or recognized financially for all the economic benefits that they provide. I think we all agree that it has a lot of social economic benefits by investing on this, but this is not reflected on the financial mechanisms that we have right now. So how is it that we can bring further finance, climate finance to railways, or sustainability linked instruments that work for railways and compensate for all the benefits that they bring to society. That's more or less where I would.
Muy bien. Henry.
Well, I would like to say that the head of state, the president of a country, I think the first thing they need to bear in mind is to improve the life quality of the society. And how can it be improved? Well, by performing this type of projects. In Panama, in 2010, we started with the construction of a metro. And it's going in line 3, and I think we are talking about 60 something kilometers. We're not about this is not like Bogota. We're not talking about 1 million people, but yeah, hundreds of millions might be using it, and we're going to expand that vision to create the railroad, and the metro is a social part of the city, but the railroad will be expanded to all the region. Carlos Fernando. Well, I share with what my partners have said, but and the experience of Colombia and Bogota. I have the concern of the second line of the metro. We're waiting for the bid in terms of weeks, but the times of government cause difficulty. If that process gets to the middle of the project, the risk is, this is at stake and Colombia needs to work on this. Let's take out the previous discussion of the electoral phases, and these projects should be strategic for the state. We should take them out of the electoral cycle because that is very harmful for technical, serious discussions such as this one. When we take it out of that, and when we really have projects that have strategic importance, that's the name that we have, but each government have their own projects, so we end up with thousands of different projects. So we need to define what's truly strategic for the state and to take it out of the electoral cycle so it moves forward and they can get to a closure. Joanna, what do we have to do that we are not doing? I don't know if we're doing it, but I think we can always do better. And I'm talking about banks. How can we share the experience that we have between banks? Every time more when we have projects and the IDB can finance a lot because we would like to work with CAF and others partners. How can we work more and more together so we can have the better and equal the same social and environmental standards so we can learn from one another? We do it in the organization where we have a technical team and they can work on a metro in Spain, they can work on a railroad in Sweden, another one in India, and this type of knowledge is shared among the promoters. But how can we do the due diligence with each other? How can we share knowledge? And I think we're doing it every time more and every time better. Well, thank you very much to all of you for listening. And thank you to the panelists for such an interesting conversation. Of course, thank you to the CAF for inviting us all to be here. Thank you very much. We thank the speakers for such an important conversation of this. And don't forget to share on the social media with the hashtag Economic Forum CAF. And on X, Facebook, and Instagram. Follow us on Agenda CAF. Now we invite you all to come with us to the plenary for the closure of the International Economic Forum Latin America and the Caribbean organized by CAF. Thank you very much for being with us this afternoon and have a wonderful afternoon.